Small steps lead to giant leaps. Be 1% better today than you were yesterday, and watch your world transform. "1% better than yesterday. How to motivate yourself to change your bad habits." Written by Rena Mydrake and published by Listen, Grow Sleep. Introduction. Think about the last time you tried to change a habit. Maybe you wanted to exercise more, eat healthier, or stop procrastinating. What approach did you take? If you're like most people, you probably tried to scare yourself into changing. If I don't exercise, I'll get unhealthy. If I keep eating junk food, I'll gain weight. If I don't stop procrastinating, I'll fail. We've all been there. We believe that if we just frighten ourselves enough about the consequences, we'll finally change our behavior. But here's the thing. This approach rarely works. And it's not because you lack willpower or determination. It's because your brain simply doesn't respond well to threats and warnings. In this audiobook, we're going to explore a revolutionary approach to changing habits. One that works with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. We'll discover why traditional approaches to behavior change often fail, and more importantly, what actually works based on cutting-edge research in behavioral psychology. The truth is, sustainable change doesn't come from fear or shame. It comes from harnessing the power of small positive steps, becoming just 1% better each day. By the end of this audiobook, you'll have a practical framework for transforming any habit, not through intimidation, but through strategies that actually align with how your brain naturally functions. So let's begin this journey together, not with warnings and threats, but with curiosity and optimism about what's possible when we understand the true science of motivation and change. Chapter 1. The myth of motivation through fear. Have you ever tried to scare yourself into changing a habit? Perhaps you've stood in front of the mirror, pointing out every flaw, hoping that self-criticism would finally motivate you to hit the gym. Or maybe you've plastered your workspace with dire warnings about the consequences of procrastination. If so, you're not alone. We have a deeply ingrained belief that fear is a powerful motivator. Parents use it with children. If you don't study, you'll fail. Health campaigns use it. Smoking kills. And we use it on ourselves. If I don't change now, I'll regret it later. This approach seems logical. After all, if something threatens our well-being, shouldn't we be motivated to avoid it? But here's the surprising truth. Research consistently shows that fear-based motivation has limited effectiveness in creating lasting behavior change. Consider smoking cessation campaigns. Studies have found that graphic warnings on cigarette packages rarely lead to quitting. In fact, one fascinating study revealed that after viewing these warnings, quitting actually became a lower priority for many smokers. How could this be possible? The answer lies in how our brains process threatening information. When faced with a threat, our brain's primary goal isn't to solve the problem. It's to reduce the uncomfortable feeling the threat creates, and there are two main ways we do this. First, we rationalize. We create stories that minimize the threat. My grandfather smoked his whole life and lived to 95. I only smoke socially, so it's not that bad. I'll quit next month when things are less stressful. These rationalizations don't change the reality of the risk, but they make us feel better about it. Second, we avoid. We simply look away from the warning signs. We change the channel when the health PSA comes on. We ignore the fitness app notifications. We avoid stepping on the scale. This avoidance provides immediate emotional relief, but prevents us from taking necessary action. Think about your financial behavior. When the stock market is performing well, people check their investment accounts frequently. It feels good to see those numbers going up. But when the market drops, account logins plummet. People literally avoid looking at negative information, even when awareness could help them make better decisions. This pattern repeats across virtually every area of life where behavior change is desirable. We see warning signs about our health, relationships, or work habits, but we find ways to look away or explain them away until the consequences become unavoidable. The problem isn't that we don't care about future outcomes. We absolutely do. But our brains are wired to prioritize emotional comfort in the present moment over potential benefits in the distant future. And this is precisely why fear-based motivation typically fails. So if scaring ourselves doesn't work, what does? The answer might surprise you. Instead of fighting against your brain's natural tendencies, what if you could work with them? What if the key to lasting change isn't fear at all, but something entirely different? In the next chapter, we'll explore the fascinating psychology of avoidance, why we so readily turn away from negative information, even when it could help us, and more importantly, we'll begin to uncover what this means for creating effective strategies for behavior change. Chapter 2. The psychology of avoidance. Let's conduct a simple thought experiment. Imagine you're at a doctor's office for a routine checkup. The doctor offers you two options. You can either learn about potential health issues you might face, or you can hear about aspects of your health that are better than average. Which would you choose? If you're like most people, you'd probably say you want to know about both. After all, we think of ourselves as rational beings who want complete information to make good decisions. But research tells a different story about how we actually behave. When faced with this exact scenario in real life, people consistently show a strong preference for positive information over negative information, even when the negative information could potentially save their lives. This isn't a character flaw. It's a fundamental aspect of human psychology that affects everyone, regardless of intelligence, education, or willpower. This tendency to avoid negative information is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. For our ancestors, immediate threats, like predators or hostile tribes, required immediate action. But abstract, future threats didn't trigger the same urgency. If you think about it, this makes perfect sense. Why worry about something that might happen years from now when there are immediate concerns to address? This avoidance behavior manifests in countless ways in modern life. We postpone medical checkups when we suspect something might be wrong. We avoid looking at our credit card statements when we know we've overspent. We put off performance reviews when we fear criticism. Consider how this plays out with personal finances. Financial advisors consistently report that clients avoid looking at their investment accounts during market downturns. One study tracked account logins over a 2-year period and found a striking pattern. When markets were up, logins increased. When markets were down, logins decreased dramatically. This avoidance isn't just emotional, it's strategic. By not looking at negative information, we protect ourselves from having to confront uncomfortable truths and make difficult changes. It's a short-term emotional regulation strategy that unfortunately creates long-term problems. The pattern becomes even more pronounced when we look at health behaviors. In one revealing study, participants were given the opportunity to receive genetic testing that would reveal their risk for certain diseases. Those who believed they might be at high risk were significantly less likely to opt for the testing compared to those who believed they were at low risk. In other words, the people who could benefit most from the information were precisely the ones avoiding it. This avoidance tendency creates a particularly challenging obstacle for habit change. When we try to motivate ourselves through warnings and threats, we're essentially creating the exact conditions that trigger avoidance. We're setting up a situation where our brain's natural response will be to look away, rationalize, or procrastinate. But here's where things get interesting. While we're remarkably good at avoiding negative information, we're equally skilled at seeking out and absorbing positive information. And this asymmetry provides a crucial clue about how we might approach behavior change more effectively. Imagine if, instead of focusing on the negative consequences of not changing, we structured our approach around positive progress and improvement. What if, rather than trying to scare ourselves into change, we created systems that naturally draw us toward better behaviors? This isn't about ignoring reality or sugarcoating difficult truths. It's about understanding the psychology of motivation and designing strategies that work with our natural tendencies rather than against them. In the next chapter, we'll explore how our brains process information differently depending on whether it's positive or negative, and what this means for creating effective behavior change strategies. Chapter 3. The selective brain. Your brain is not a neutral information processor. It's more like a highly selective editor with strong preferences about what makes it into the final story. And its favorite stories? The ones where you come out looking pretty good. This isn't just vanity or self-deception, it's a fundamental feature of how our brains process information. And understanding this selective processing is crucial for anyone looking to change their habits effectively. Let's look at a fascinating experiment that reveals just how selective our brains can be. Researchers asked participants to estimate their risk for various negative life events. Things like developing a health condition, experiencing financial problems, or going through a divorce. After participants made their initial estimates, they were shown statistics about the actual average risk. Here's where it gets interesting. When participants learned that their actual risk was lower than they had estimated, good news, they readily updated their beliefs. But when they learned their risk was higher than estimated, bad news, they showed much less belief updating. In other words, good news got integrated into their thinking, while bad news was largely ignored. This selective updating isn't limited to any particular age group or demographic. The researchers tested people from age 10 to 80 and found the same pattern across the lifespan. However, there were some fascinating age-related differences. Teenagers showed the strongest optimistic bias, being particularly resistant to negative information. This bias decreased somewhat in middle age, but then increased again in older adults. Think about what this means for habit change. When we try to motivate ourselves by focusing on risks and negative outcomes, we're essentially providing exactly the kind of information our brains are most likely to filter out or minimize. This selective processing explains why simply knowing the risks of a bad habit often isn't enough to change behavior. It's not that we don't understand the information intellectually, it's that our brains process it in a way that minimizes its emotional impact and urgency. But there's a flip side to this bias that offers a promising path forward. While our brains may be resistant to negative information, they're highly receptive to positive information, particularly information about progress, improvement, and success. Consider how this plays out in learning environments. Studies of effective feedback show that people are much more likely to improve their performance when feedback focuses primarily on what they're doing right and how they can build on those strengths, rather than exclusively highlighting mistakes and weaknesses. This doesn't mean that negative feedback has no place. It absolutely does. But the ratio matters enormously. Research suggests that a ratio of about 5 positive comments to 1 negative comment creates optimal conditions for growth and improvement. When this ratio drops below 3 to 1, motivation and performance tend to suffer. What's particularly fascinating is that this selective processing operates largely outside our conscious awareness. We don't deliberately choose to ignore negative information. It happens automatically as part of our brain's default information processing. This automatic filtering helps explain why willpower alone is often insufficient for habit change. When we rely solely on conscious effort and determination, we're fighting against powerful unconscious processes that are constantly working to maintain our positive self-image and emotional comfort. The good news is that once we understand these processes, we can design habit change strategies that work with them rather than against them. Instead of trying to override our brain's natural tendencies through sheer force of will, we can create environments and approaches that naturally engage our brain's preference for positive information. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore 3 powerful principles that leverage this understanding: social incentives, immediate rewards, and progress monitoring. These principles don't require us to fight our nature. They work precisely because they align with how our brains naturally process information and motivation. Chapter 4: The Social Power of Change. Humans are fundamentally social creatures. We're constantly, often unconsciously, looking to others to guide our behavior. This social awareness isn't a weakness. It's one of our greatest strengths, and it can be a powerful tool for changing habits. Think about the last time you were in an unfamiliar situation, perhaps a new workplace or social setting. How did you figure out how to behave? Chances are you observed what others were doing and used that as your guide. This social learning is so natural that we rarely even notice it happening. What's fascinating is that this social influence operates even when we believe we're making completely independent decisions. In one remarkable study, researchers examined hotel guests' towel reuse behavior. When rooms contained a sign simply asking guests to reuse towels to help the environment, about 35% complied. But when the sign was changed to indicate that the majority of guests in that specific room had reused their towels, compliance jumped to nearly 50%. The simple knowledge that others had made a certain choice significantly influenced behavior. This powerful social influence extends to virtually every area of behavior. We're more likely to exercise if our friends exercise. We're more likely to eat healthily if our social circle eats healthily. We're more likely to save money if we know our peers are saving money. The science behind this influence is compelling. Neuroimaging studies show that when we learn about others' opinions, there's significant activation in the emotional centers of our brain, particularly in areas associated with reward processing and social cognition. This activation can actually predict how likely we are to conform to those opinions later. What's particularly interesting is that this social influence doesn't require direct observation or interaction. Simply knowing what others are doing, especially others we perceive as similar to ourselves, can significantly impact our behavior. Tax authorities around the world have leveraged this principle to improve compliance. In one study, adding a single sentence to tax reminder letters, 9 out of 10 people in Britain pay their taxes on time, increased timely payments by 15%. This simple social reference generated millions in additional revenue without any enforcement costs. But there's an important nuance here. The reference group matters enormously. We're most influenced by people we perceive as similar to ourselves or groups we identify with. A general statement like, most Americans save for retirement, might have limited impact, but most people in your profession with your income level save 10% for retirement could be highly motivating. This social influence works through multiple mechanisms. First, it provides information about what behaviors are likely to be effective or appropriate. If most people are doing something, we unconsciously assume there's probably a good reason for it. Second, it establishes social norms that we're naturally motivated to follow. Humans have a deep-seated desire to belong and fit in with their social groups. Deviating from group norms creates psychological discomfort that we instinctively seek to avoid. Third, it creates opportunities for social accountability. When we know others are aware of our behavior, we're more likely to follow through on our commitments. This is why public commitments are generally more effective than private ones, and why having an exercise partner typically leads to more consistent workouts than exercising alone. So how can we harness this social power for habit change? There are several practical strategies. First, make your desired habits visible to others. Share your goals with friends, join communities focused on the behavior you want to adopt, or use social media to document your progress. The simple act of making your intentions public increases your likelihood of following through. Second, deliberately seek out social environments that support your desired habits. If you want to exercise more, join a running club or find a workout buddy. If you want to eat healthier, spend more time with people who prioritize nutrition. Your social environment shapes your behavior far more than willpower alone. Third, look for specific, relevant social proof. General statistics about what most people do are less powerful than specific information about people similar to you. Seek out communities or examples that closely match your circumstances and goals. The beauty of social incentives is that they don't require you to fight against your natural tendencies. Instead, they leverage your brain's inherent social awareness and desire for belonging. By structuring your social environment intentionally, you can make desired behaviors feel natural and automatic rather than forced. In the next chapter, we'll explore another powerful principle for habit change: the strategic use of immediate rewards to bridge the gap between present actions and future benefits. Chapter 5: The Reward Revolution. We all want good things in our future: health, wealth, success, happiness. And intellectually, we understand that our current habits play a crucial role in determining those future outcomes. So why is it so difficult to maintain habits that we know will benefit us in the long run? The answer lies in what behavioral economists call temporal discounting, our tendency to value immediate rewards far more highly than delayed rewards, even when the delayed rewards are objectively larger or more important. This isn't a character flaw or a lack of intelligence. It's a fundamental feature of human psychology that evolved for good reason. For our ancestors living in uncertain environments, immediate resources had clear survival value, while future benefits were inherently uncertain. The future might never arrive, predators, disease, or rival tribes could intervene, so prioritizing the present was a sensible strategy. In today's world, this same psychological tendency creates a significant challenge for habit formation. The benefits of good habits, better health, financial security, career advancement, typically unfold over months or years, while the costs, discomfort, effort, foregone pleasures, are immediate. Conversely, bad habits offer immediate gratification, while their costs are delayed and uncertain. This temporal mismatch creates what researchers call the present bias, our tendency to choose smaller, immediate rewards over larger, delayed ones. It's why we hit the snooze button instead of exercising, order takeout instead of cooking a healthy meal, or watch another episode instead of working on an important project. The traditional approach to overcoming this bias has been to emphasize willpower and delayed gratification, essentially to fight against our natural psychological tendencies. But there's a more effective approach, restructuring our environment to provide immediate rewards for behaviors that benefit us in the long term. Consider a fascinating study on smoking cessation. Researchers divided participants into two groups. The first group received standard information about the long-term health benefits of quitting. The second group was offered a small financial reward for each day they remained smoke-free, verified through biochemical testing. The results were striking. Participants in the immediate reward group were 3 times more likely to maintain abstinence than those in the standard information group. Even more remarkably, these effects persisted long after the reward program ended, suggesting that the immediate rewards had helped participants push through the difficult initial phase of habit change until the new behavior became self-sustaining. Similar results have been found across a wide range of behaviors, from exercise and healthy eating to medication adherence and financial saving. When immediate rewards are attached to behaviors with delayed benefits, those behaviors become significantly more sustainable. This approach works because it aligns our reward systems with our long-term goals. Instead of fighting against our brain's preference for immediate gratification, we harness that preference to support behaviors that serve our future selves. The rewards don't need to be financial. Any form of immediate positive feedback can serve this purpose. Social recognition, tracking progress, celebrating milestones, or creating enjoyable aspects of the behavior itself. The key is that the reward must be immediate, certain, and directly linked to the desired behavior. For example, if you're trying to establish a regular exercise habit, you might create a pleasant ritual around your workout, like listening to a favorite podcast only while exercising. Track your progress visually and celebrate small improvements. Join a class or group where your attendance is noticed and appreciated. Reward yourself with a small healthy treat after completing your workout. These immediate rewards don't replace the long-term benefits of exercise. They complement them by providing the immediate gratification that your brain naturally seeks. What's particularly powerful about this approach is that it can create a positive feedback loop. As you experience the immediate rewards of a behavior, that behavior becomes more intrinsically rewarding. Over time, what began as an externally motivated habit can transform into a genuine preference. This transformation happens because our brains are constantly updating our expectations based on experience. When we repeatedly associate a behavior with positive outcomes, even small, immediate ones, our anticipation of that behavior shifts from dread to desire. The habit itself becomes rewarding. This principle explains why many long-term practitioners of initially challenging habits, like meditation or exercise, eventually come to crave these activities. What began as a disciplined practice maintained through external rewards gradually becomes an intrinsically rewarding part of their identity. By strategically using immediate rewards, we can bridge the gap between our present and future selves, aligning our natural desire for immediate gratification with behaviors that serve our long-term well-being. In the next chapter, we'll explore the third key principle for effective habit change, the power of monitoring progress and focusing on improvement rather than perfection. Chapter 6. Progress over perfection. Imagine you're learning to play the piano. Which approach do you think would be more motivating? Having a teacher who points out every mistake you make, or one who acknowledges your improvement while gently guiding you toward better technique? For most of us, the answer is obvious. We're motivated by progress, not by constant reminders of our shortcomings. Yet when it comes to changing our own habits, we often take the harsh critic approach, focusing on our failures, berating ourselves for backsliding, and setting impossibly high standards that virtually guarantee disappointment. This perfectionistic approach isn't just unpleasant, it's ineffective. Research consistently shows that monitoring progress in a positive, improvement-focused way is far more motivating than fixating on failures or shortcomings. The science behind this is fascinating. Neuroimaging studies reveal that our brains are highly efficient at processing positive information about future possibilities. When we see evidence of progress or improvement, reward centers in our brain activate, releasing dopamine and creating a sense of motivation and anticipation. By contrast, our brains process negative information about the future much less efficiently. When we focus on potential decline or failure, we're more likely to experience threat responses that trigger avoidance rather than engagement. This asymmetry in information processing provides a crucial insight for habit change. Focusing attention on progress and improvement is not just more pleasant, it's more effective at motivating sustained behavior. Consider a landmark study on hand-washing compliance in hospitals. Despite knowing the critical importance of hand hygiene for preventing infections, compliance rates among healthcare workers typically hover around 40%. Traditional approaches focusing on the risks of non-compliance, emphasizing the potential harm to patients, have limited effectiveness. But when researchers installed electronic boards that displayed real-time hand-washing compliance rates, showing staff how well they were doing compared to previous shifts and other departments, compliance skyrocketed to over 90%. The intervention was so successful that it was quickly implemented throughout the hospital. What made this approach so effective? Instead of focusing on the negative consequences of poor hand hygiene, it directed attention to progress and improvement. It created a game-like environment where staff could see their performance improving in real time, triggering the brain's natural reward response to progress. This principle applies across virtually every domain of behavior change. Whether you're trying to exercise more, eat healthier, save money, or learn a new skill, monitoring progress in a positive, improvement-focused way is far more motivating than focusing on shortcomings or failures. There are several key elements that make progress monitoring particularly effective. First, make progress visible. Our brains respond strongly to visual feedback. Charts, graphs, streaks, or any visual representation of improvement can significantly enhance motivation. This is why fitness trackers, habit tracking apps, and visual progress markers are so effective. They make otherwise invisible progress tangible and concrete. Second, celebrate small wins. Don't wait until you've reached your ultimate goal to acknowledge success. Recognize and appreciate incremental improvements along the way. Each small win triggers a positive emotional response that reinforces the behavior and builds momentum toward larger changes. Third, focus on relative rather than absolute progress. Compare your current performance to your past performance, not to some ideal standard. If you exercised twice this week and once last week, that's a 100% improvement. A cause for celebration, not criticism, because it's not 7 days a week. Fourth, track process metrics, not just outcome metrics. Don't just measure end results, weight lost, money saved. Also, track the behaviors that lead to those results. Workouts completed, meals cooked at home. Process metrics give you more frequent feedback and a greater sense of control. The power of progress monitoring lies in its alignment with how our brains naturally process information and motivation. When we see evidence of improvement, even small improvement, our brain's reward systems activate, creating positive emotions and enhancing motivation to continue. This creates a virtuous cycle. Positive monitoring leads to increased motivation, which leads to improved behavior, which creates more progress to monitor, further enhancing motivation. By contrast, negative, perfectionistic approaches often create vicious cycles of disappointment, reduced motivation, and behavioral backsliding. Perhaps most importantly, progress-focused monitoring gives us a sense of control and agency. It shifts our attention from what we haven't yet achieved to what we can actively do to improve. This sense of control is a fundamental psychological need and a powerful motivator for sustained behavior change. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this sense of control, the feeling that we have agency over our behavior and our outcomes, forms the foundation for lasting habit change. Chapter 7. Taking control of your habits. There's a fundamental psychological need that drives much of human behavior, the need for control. We want to feel that we have agency over our lives, that our actions matter, and that we can influence our outcomes. When this sense of control is threatened, we experience stress, anxiety, and often a decrease in motivation. This need for control plays a crucial role in habit change. When we feel in control of our behavior, we're more likely to persist through challenges and setbacks. When we feel out of control, we're more likely to give up or not even try in the first place. Consider a fascinating experiment on nursing home residents. One group was given a houseplant and told that the staff would take care of it for them. Another group was given a plant and told that they were responsible for its care. The difference in outcomes was remarkable. The residents who were given responsibility for their plants showed significant improvements in health, activity levels, and overall well-being compared to those who had no control. This same principle applies to habit change. When we feel that our habits are imposed on us, whether by others or by our own rigid rules, we often experience psychological reactance, a form of resistance to perceived threats to our freedom. This reactance can manifest as procrastination, rationalization, or outright rebellion against the very habits we're trying to establish. By contrast, when we feel that we're freely choosing our habits and have control over how we implement them, we experience greater intrinsic motivation and persistence. This sense of autonomy is one of the 3 fundamental psychological needs identified in self-determination theory, alongside competence and relatedness. So how do we foster this sense of control in habit change? There are several powerful strategies. First, focus on choices rather than obligations. Instead of telling yourself, I have to exercise today, try, I choose to exercise today because it aligns with my values of health and vitality. This simple reframing shifts your perspective from external pressure to internal choice, enhancing your sense of autonomy. Second, create flexible frameworks rather than rigid rules. Absolute rules like never eat sugar or exercise every single day set you up for failure and diminish your sense of control when you inevitably break them. Instead, create flexible frameworks like I aim to limit sugary foods to special occasions, or I plan to exercise most days of the week with at least one rest day. Third, develop if-then contingency plans for obstacles. Research on implementation intentions shows that having specific plans for potential obstacles significantly increases follow-through. For example, if I'm too tired to do my full workout, then I'll do just 10 minutes of stretching. These plans give you a sense of control even when facing challenges. Fourth, focus on process goals rather than outcome goals. You have much more direct control over your actions than your results. For example, I will walk for 30 minutes 3 times this week is more controllable than I will lose 2 pounds this week. Process goals keep your attention on what you can directly influence. Fifth, practice self-compassion when you face setbacks. Harsh self-criticism after a lapse often triggers a sense of helplessness and loss of control, leading to what psychologists call the what the hell effect, the tendency to completely abandon a goal after a small slip-up. Self-compassion, by contrast, helps you maintain your sense of agency and get back on track more quickly. What's particularly powerful about enhancing your sense of control is that it creates a positive feedback loop. When you feel in control, you're more likely to take action. When you take action and see results, your sense of control increases further, motivating more action. This virtuous cycle explains why small initial successes can lead to dramatic long-term changes. Each small win builds your sense of agency and self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to succeed in specific situations. As your self-efficacy grows, you become more willing to tackle bigger challenges and persist through greater obstacles. The electricity bill example from the original research illustrates this principle beautifully. By showing homeowners that they were using less energy than their neighbours, social incentives, giving them immediate positive feedback, a smiley face, and tracking their progress over time, the intervention created a powerful sense of control. Homeowners could see that their actions mattered and that they had the ability to influence their energy consumption. What's particularly interesting is that this sense of control often transfers across domains. When you successfully change one habit, you build confidence in your ability to change others. This is why people who successfully establish a regular exercise routine often find it easier to improve their eating habits or financial behaviors afterward. The sense of control generalizes, creating a foundation for broader life changes. This transferability highlights an important strategy for habit change. Start small. By focusing on a single, manageable habit change, you can build your sense of control and create momentum for larger changes. The goal isn't perfection or transformation overnight. It's establishing that crucial sense of agency that will fuel ongoing growth and development. In the final chapter, we'll bring together everything we have learned to create a practical framework for becoming 1% better every day. A sustainable approach to habit change that works with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. Chapter 8. The 1% Better Framework. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored the science of behavior change, why traditional approaches often fail, and what actually works based on how our brains naturally function. Now, it's time to bring everything together into a practical framework you can apply to any habit you want to change. The 1%. Better framework isn't about dramatic overnight transformations. It's about consistent, incremental improvement, becoming just slightly better each day. This approach might seem modest, but it's based on a powerful mathematical reality. Small improvements compound over time, leading to remarkable long-term results. If you improve by just 1% each day, after a year, you'll be 37 times better than when you started. This isn't just motivational math, it's the reality of compound growth. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day, you'll decline to nearly zero. This is why small daily choices matter so much more than occasional big efforts. The 1% Better framework consists of 5 key elements, each designed to work with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. Let's explore each element and how to apply it to your own habit change goals. First, start with identity, not actions. Lasting behavior change begins with how you see yourself. Instead of focusing solely on what you want to do differently, consider who you want to become. Research shows that identity-based habits are far more sustainable than action-based habits. For example, rather than saying, "I want to run 3 times a week," consider, "I want to become a runner." This subtle shift changes your focus from forcing yourself to perform specific actions to expressing an identity that's important to you. When faced with a choice, like whether to go for a run on a rainy day, you're no longer just deciding whether to perform an action. You're deciding what kind of person you are. To apply this element, ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to become? Then identify the small behaviors that would express that identity. Focus on becoming that person through consistent small actions rather than trying to force big changes through willpower alone. Second, design your environment for success. Your environment has an enormous influence on your behavior, often more than your conscious intentions. Rather than relying solely on motivation, create an environment that makes your desired habits easier and your unwanted habits harder. This might mean placing your running shoes by the door, preparing healthy meals in advance, using website blockers during work hours, or removing social media apps from your phone. The goal is to reduce the friction for positive habits and increase the friction for negative ones. Remember, motivation is unreliable, but your environment is always there. By designing your environment thoughtfully, you can make good habits the path of least resistance rather than requiring constant willpower. Third, leverage social forces. As we explored earlier, humans are profoundly influenced by social norms and connections. Rather than trying to change in isolation, deliberately use social forces to support your habits. Join communities where your desired behavior is the norm. Make public commitments to the habits you want to establish. Find an accountability partner who shares your goals. Share your progress with others who will celebrate your successes. The key is to surround yourself with people who make your desired behavior seem normal and expected rather than exceptional or strange. When your social environment supports your habits, change becomes dramatically easier. Fourth, create immediate rewards. Don't rely solely on delayed outcomes to motivate your habits. Create immediate positive feedback that bridges the gap between present actions and future benefits. Track your behavior visually and celebrate streaks. Create small rewards for following through. Pair activities you need to do with activities you want to do. Find ways to make the habit itself more enjoyable. Remember that your brain values immediate rewards far more highly than delayed ones. By creating immediate positive feedback, you align your reward system with your long-term goals. Fifth, focus on systems, not goals. Goals are important for setting direction, but systems are what actually produce results. A goal is the destination. A system is the vehicle that gets you there. Instead of fixating on losing 30 pounds, focus on establishing a sustainable eating and exercise system. Instead of obsessing over saving a specific amount of money, create a system that automatically directs funds to savings before you can spend them. The beauty of systems is that they remove the need for constant decision making. Once established, a good system makes the right behavior automatic rather than requiring continuous effort and willpower. Now, let's put these elements together into a practical process for applying the 1% better framework to any habit you want to change. Step 1. Identify the habit you want to change and connect it to a deeper identity. Ask yourself not just what you want to do differently, but who you want to become. Step 2. Make the habit ridiculously small to start. Scale it down until it feels almost too easy. The goal is to establish consistency first, then gradually increase difficulty. Step 3. Design your environment to support the habit. Remove friction for positive behaviors and add friction for negative ones. Step 4. Create immediate positive feedback. Find ways to reward yourself right away for following through, even if the long-term benefits are distant. Step 5. Track your progress visually. Use a simple system to monitor your consistency and celebrate improvement rather than perfection. Step 6. Build in social accountability. Share your intentions with others and find ways to make your habit part of your social identity. Step 7. Establish if-then plans for obstacles. Anticipate challenges and decide in advance how you'll handle them to maintain your sense of control. Step 8. Focus on consistency over intensity. It's better to do a little bit consistently than to do a lot occasionally. Remember that habits are about who you become through repeated actions, not individual heroic efforts. The power of the 1% better framework lies in its alignment with how your brain actually works. Instead of fighting against your natural tendencies through willpower and self-criticism, it harnesses those tendencies to support positive change. By focusing on identity, environment, social forces, immediate rewards, and systems, you create conditions where good habits emerge naturally rather than requiring constant struggle. The result is sustainable change that compounds over time, transforming your life through the power of small, consistent improvements. Remember, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be slightly better today than you were yesterday. Over time, those small improvements will lead to remarkable results, not through dramatic transformation, but through the quiet power of compound growth. Becoming 1% better each day isn't just about changing specific behaviors. It's about developing a mindset that values continuous improvement over perfection, process over outcomes, and consistency over intensity. With this mindset and the practical strategies we've explored, you have everything you need to transform your habits and ultimately your life, one small step at a time.